I wanted to show a good example of what can happen if you don't build the turbo right. This is one of my customers bought a bunch of parts to build him a turbo, and of course I had the video on showing you how to install it and all that stuff. So what I think happened, well, let me show you what happened first. That was the shaft, and now there's pieces of the turbine wheel all in the housing because the wheel completely came apart. My thoughts on this is I think one of the covers was not fastened down properly, and this is actually really common. So I think one of the covers was not fastened down tight enough or properly, and then it slid off. The shaft dipped down, hit against the turbine housing, and then just wrecked the whole thing. Here's a shot of what the turbine or the heat shield looks like. Some things I thought were interesting about this is the turbine actually busted the backside of this, which is pretty common to happen when you have this bit of destruction of the turbine wheel. But this housing still contained the turbine wheel inside of it, which it did exactly what it was supposed to do if a problem was to happen like this. There's a piece of the turbine still in there. What I think is neat is the shaft itself, the fusion weld did not break. The turbine blade and the shaft are two separate pieces. The blade gets fused onto the shaft by a fusion weld and it becomes one piece. And you can see that it just completely bent right there. There's also a piece of brass in the center there, but I don't really understand why that's there. I'm thinking that maybe that if there was a contamination piece when he put it together, that it locked up on there and ground into the bearing. And another thing I thought was interesting is somebody clearly hit it with a hammer. Looks like he also forced in the shaft with the rear seal and kinked it in there, because that would not happen. That gouge would not happen from just a normal failure, because that seal, the way that mark was made right there, the only way you could do that is if you're pushing it in, and he gouged the shaft right there with the rear seal. The rear seal isn't even in existence at this point. And there's a good shot of where all the turbine wheel went. Another thing that kind of sucks about this is the guy filed for a refund on PayPal on eBay, and of course eBay gives him his money back. And what does he do? He goes and buys all the parts from me once again and says that the parts were defective. So I lost about $500 on this deal. But I guess even worse, sometimes I'll have a customer build it themselves. They'll have a problem like this. They don't really understand what they did wrong. Then they'll get their money back through eBay, and then on top of that, when I knew it was their fault, they left me a negative review. This is part of the business when you're selling people products to build their own turbo, but if they miss something or they don't follow the instructions properly, then the turbo gets completely destroyed. Usually something like this happens about once every month or two, but actually the failure rate is really impressive if you look at how many orders we've processed every month or how many products we've sold. I guess the reason why the failure rate is so low is because a lot of the people that buy our products are actually turbo shops. We process about 700 orders every month, so I'm looking at a failure rate of about 1 every 2 months, which is about 1 out of 1,400, which is far less than 1%. The last one that I remember having a problem was somebody that bought a 62 millimeter compressor wheel and housing, and the wheel we had balanced with an assembly, and we told the customer, because it was our last wheel, that he would have to have it rebalanced, and we got it back within about a week, and he never had rebalanced the turbo like we told him he would have had to. So I guess maybe that was kind of our fault, even though we told him to do that. But we probably should have just never sold him that in the first place, trusting somebody else that they were going to do what they said they were going to do.